Hi, Khansa.
Hi, sorry for the delay. Unexpected fire alarm. Can you see me properly? I'm
Yes.
sort of improvising with devices here.
Yeah.
Is the video fine?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Hansa.
Sorry about this again.
No problem.
Okay, great. Should we get started? Let me know when we're live.
Yes. So I'll wait for Praveen because Praveen today is taking care of the tech part.
Okay.
Yeah. We would know, in fact, like
I think it's ready.
there is the recording, but not the live. So once it's ready, I'm going to let you know. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I see that some people joined. So can you all hear us? So for the participants today, because I see some people are not connected to the, okay, great. If you are not connected to the audio, just make sure that you connect, when you log into Zoom, use the link. It tells you if you would like to connect to the sound, to the audio of your mobile or your laptop. So make sure to link it to one of the audio systems. Hi, everyone. Hello. Yeah. Because I see some of you, they are not linked to the audio. Great.
Streaming now.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Praveen.
Thank you so much, Praveen. Khansa, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have you. And today's session is particularly close to my heart because it is on CV writing. And I remember the first time I had to make my CV, I was very nervous. I didn't know how to get started, where to start from, and what the end product should look like. Obviously, I Googled it and I saw all those articles about 10 best tips to write an impressive CV, YouTube videos for, infinitely more confusing. And so I'm excited that we have this session here for you, but for me also, just to learn more about how to write CVs, whether that is for the dream internship that you've wanted to land, or whether that is for your dream job, or whether that's just for a scholarship that you want to apply for. I'm sure this session will help you towards doing that, towards learning about this very important way of presenting yourself, of presenting your accomplishments, and applying for the things that you're passionate about. So thank you for the embassy for organizing this. And without further ado, let's introduce our panelists. We have two distinguished panelists with us today. Our first panelist for today is Ms. Page, who is a career development professional at the Qatar Career Development Center. Our second panelist for today is Ms. Andrea, who's a human resources professional at the US Embassy. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure my audience is equally as excited as me. So before we do anything else, let's talk to them a little about their own journey of making their first CV. I mean, I know I made my first CV when I was, 15 years old, because I wanted to start applying for internships and, start applying for just local jobs. So can you tell us a little about your journey of making your first CV? How did that go? What was your thought process? What were your emotions like? And how far do you think you've come today? So Ms. Page.
Thank you, Khamsa, and thank you for having me here today. Really good question. So for me, I think my first resume I made, it's been, I don't even know, 20, maybe 25 years ago now. So this was back before there was heaps of information on the internet. The internet was just, kind of around, but not as commonly used. So I went to my parents for guidance. I know that at the time I tried to put as much information as I could, but found myself in a similar situation as you mentioned. What do I put on my resume? How do I format it? Of course, I wanted to have, curly fonts or something that many things that I would not advise these days. So it was definitely a learning curve for me. And over the years, as you've grown and developed and gotten more experience, and now obviously that I work in this field, I feel fairly confident in my resume. But when I first started out, it is really overwhelming. What do you put on it? How do you word it? How do you make it stand out to an employer? So I hope that we can answer those questions for you today.
I'm sure. So let's move on to you, Miss Andrea. What was your journey like? And how was your first CV writing experience?
So mine was a lot like Paige's. It's been over 20 years since I wrote my first CV. And just like Paige said, there weren't as many internet resources as there are available today. And so I remember I was still in high school at the time. And so I made use of my guidance counselor. There were books with resume templates and ideas for how to format your resume. And so I was reliant on what I found in books. And so I started off with, pouring as much information as I could think of into my resume, because I had so little really to put in of my education history and my experience. And that has evolved literally every single time I open my resume. I change and I update things to this day. And like Paige said, it's something that I feel much more confident in today, having worked in this area for a long time, having had a resume. But I definitely was very insecure about my resume and if it was right, or if I should be doing it differently or add more or less when I was first having my initial experience writing one.
Thank you so much. As you spoke about the confusion that you felt, I'm sort of thinking about what a resume really is, because sometimes you look at job opportunities and it says they want a CV. Sometimes it says a resume. Sometimes it says they just want a bio. So how are all of them different, or are they the same thing? Let's get some clarification. Miss Paige.
Sure. Very good question. I get asked this question quite regularly. So it's common to be uncertain what each term means. So there is a difference between a CV and a resume. However, I will say many people will use the terms interchangeably. So a CV is typically a longer document that is utilized for roles in academia or in medicine. So it's for people who have maybe extensive publications or placements or things of that nature. So a CV is a longer document with more information to it. But most of the time when employers ask for your CV or your resume, they use that term interchangeably. And what they're really looking for is maybe a 1 to 2 page document that outlines your education, your experiences, and your achievements. So even though there is a distinction in the two terminologies, many times it's used interchangeably. If, however, you are uncertain, it is always best to ask that employer for clarification, but my guess would be most employers are going to expect that shortened document. Now, a bio, depending on how they're asking for it, would be written in paragraph format, and it would be just a quick synopsis of your professional background, not like a resume with dot points and whatnot, but it would be written in a paragraph format. Many times a bio is utilized prior to like a speaking engagement, such as tonight. So depending on what exactly they're looking for, you would write something different, whether it's a longer CV, again, for academia kind of roles, shortened resume, 1 to 2 pages, or a brief few paragraph bio. Andrea, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
Absolutely.
No, you
And Andrea,
very comprehensively.
Sorry, can you add on to it and tell us a little about whether a CV should also include a bio? So should there be a couple of lines of bio? Sometimes people mention their favorite colors and hobbies and whatnot. Should that all be there on a resume or a CV?
So I can take this one. Typically, you want to keep your personal information on a CV or a resume just to your contact information, and then your professional and educational experience. You can include hobbies and interests. I will tell you that when I'm recruiting, I don't pay a lot of attention to such a thing. But particularly if it's very related to the job. If you have, for example, maybe volunteer experience or academic experience, different from your work experience, but related to the job that you're applying for, it may be relevant to include in that case.
So basically, you tailor what you want to present of yourself to what you're applying for.
Exactly.
Okay, so I mean, bio or this small presentation of yourself is a small part of it. So Ms. Page, can you tell us a little more about the rest of it? What should it include? What should be the components of it? How should we sort of section it? What should be in it, basically? You know, we just put a number of things on it.
Sure.
Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it isn't what's being looked for.
Sure, absolutely. So obviously when starting your resume, one of the most important things you need is your contact details. So you would want to make sure that you've got your name, your best mobile number with the international calling code as well, and your email address. Do make sure your email address is professional. If you've got a personal, fun, cat lover or something email, keep it for your personal life, but make sure that you have a professional email. So you need your contact details. That's first and foremost. Then there's a few optional sections you can have. You might have, as you were kind of talking, I think a little bit about Hansa, you might have a professional summary or a career profile on your resume towards the top. If you choose to utilize something like this, it's 2 to 3 statements about yourself that provide the reader with a really quick snapshot of who you are and your achievements. So again, not personal, not colors or hobbies, but something about what is your education or your experience, and any quick achievements that you would want to highlight. So that is optional. You definitely then would need to include your education. So if you are out of university, put your university education. If you are applying to university, put your high school education. So you want your education on your resume, including whatever you've studied. So if you're in university, what's your major and all of that. Then you want your work experience, generally in reverse chronological order. This means most recent to least recent. So if you're currently in a job, put that on there. Now, work experience can include a variety of different things as well. It could be volunteer work, it could be internships, it could be placements, it might be research. So you could have a combination of things within your work experience section. And then as well on your resume, you might want to include a section about your skills. So you might have a separate section for your skills, or you might actually incorporate this into your work experience. But you do want to highlight both your transferable skills, things like communication, teamwork, leadership, as well as your technical skills. So if you've got technical skills that are relevant to the role, make sure that you include those on there as well. So those are some of the main components that you would want to ensure that you include on a resume.
So got it. Basically, no Harry Potter email addresses for me. And I have to make sure that everything that I say looks professional, is organized in these proper sections. So present sort of yourself holistically, whether that is your experience, whether that is any fun fellowships you received, or whether that is the skills that you have. Ms. Andrea, would you like to add anything to it? And I mean, as a HR professional, something really nice that perhaps you've seen in CVs, or something not so nice that you've seen in CVs?
So the main focus of your CV is definitely going to be your education and work experience. But a couple other things that may be relevant, you might include memberships, especially if you're a member of any professional organizations that you want to call out, or if you have any licensure that you might want to add. For example, I see that we have someone in the group today who is an architect. So if you're professionally licensed as an architect, you want to include that on your resume. You might also include relevant trainings that you've done, whether if it's just in university and it's courses that you've taken, or for example, maybe if you're in the technology field, maybe you have Microsoft or other programming certifications, you might want to call those out as well, because that further boosts what you have to bring to the job. I will call out that your resume is the first opportunity that you have to show yourself to an employer. And I read recently that your resume is not what you're using to get the job, it's what you're using to get an interview. So you really want to put your best foot forward and make sure that it's formatted professionally and that you do not have any spelling or grammatical errors. You do not want that to be the first impression that you are making on an employer.
Fair enough. Make sure that you use a grammar check or a spell check, or even ask your friends or parents or somebody to read it over for you. Tell you if it sounds off, or if something is too long, or if your words are making sense to them. Um, Resumes are hard to make because sometimes you don't have experience. I mean, you are supposed to give the very first job that you're applying to a resume, but that is the very first job you're applying for. So what do you do? Like, how do you do this when you're a fresh graduate, or if you're a high school student and want to get your first job or internship? Miss Page, can you talk us through that a little bit?
Sure. So first thing I would recommend is while you are studying, build your resume. If you don't have one already, get one started. And then as you continue to do things through school, whether it's projects that you really feel like you learned technical knowledge on, or you really demonstrated skills on, or if you did any extracurricular activities, if you were a mentor, or if you were a class lead, or any of these activities are things that you can incorporate onto your resume to demonstrate to that employer that you do have transferable skills in whatever the field might be. So that's always a question I get, is how do I get experience without having any experience? And the thing is to think creatively.
Sorry, someone needs to mute themselves.
But the challenge is to really reflect on what experiences have you gotten while you've been a student, whether it's a high school student, university student, it can be in the classroom, out of the classroom. What other things have you done that you can really articulate and show, okay, in this experience when I was student leader, I demonstrated excellent communication skills and teamwork skills and leadership abilities, and really articulate those transferable skills that are relevant for any role that you are applying to. So that's my recommendation, is build your resume as you are going, reflect on the skills, and make sure that you articulate them very clearly for the roles that you're going to apply for.
Fair enough. So if you're a high school student and you were on the basketball team or the debate team, or if you organized a conference, or if you organized an event, that's your useful experience. It's in the way that you describe it. It's in the way that you market it, so to say, as being your professional experience. Miss Andrea, would you like to add something to this with the kind of CVs you've seen, or perhaps with your own experiences? What do you do? What kind of experiences do you add? How do you frame them? Any tips or tricks?
So it all depends on what you're after, right? And you started off with a great example, Kansa. You talked about someone who maybe participated on the basketball team. And what you can talk about there, you can talk about how you learned teamwork. You can talk about how you learned collaboration. There are skills that you can speak about from that relevant experience. So like Paige said, you want to pull whatever experience you have, whether it's coursework, volunteering, work experience, being part of a team. But also don't be super stressed out about not having a lot to put into your resume just yet. It's going to grow with time. You're going to have more to put in. So don't put things in just to fill up the space. Figure out a way to make what you have to say relevant, but don't put additional bullet points in just to put additional bullet points in. It's okay, especially starting out, if your resume is one page or not even a page. It's okay. It's going to grow with time, and you're going to have a lot more experience to add in there.
Great. So, you've written that resume, you're, looking at where you want to send it. You've worked hard on it. You've had somebody proofread it. But the question is really, what do you make sure to avoid while writing this? What are the sort of, completely things that you should completely avoid, or things that you should completely forget about while writing your resume? Ms. Page.
Sure. So one thing I would avoid is using personal pronouns. So when you've got your dot points and you're explaining what you did in that role, you don't need to say, I did this. You also don't want to say Paige did this. You can just simply write the task. So make sure that every bullet point that you use starts off with a really impactful action verb that demonstrates exactly what it was that you did. So I would avoid personal pronouns, avoid utilizing your name, really utilize those strong action verbs. And as Andrea was saying earlier as well, avoid adding things for the sake of adding things on your resume. So you don't need to stuff it full of irrelevant information. If you thought, hey, you know what, I was in, I don't know, Girl Scouts when I was 6 years old. Well, that's not important anymore to the employer. So don't try to stuff things full with irrelevant information. Keep it recent. So if you're a high school student looking to apply for universities or jobs or whatever right now, keep it within a high school context. If you're a university student, then I would keep it from university and on. So I would really make sure that you keep everything relevant and recent. So these are some things that I would suggest very strongly to ensure that you do for your resume. Andrea?
You also do not necessarily need to include a photo with your resume. I know a lot of people do. That's a process that's not as common anymore. I would also recommend, if you have previous job experience that you're including, you do not need to include your reason for leaving past employers on your resume. You may be asked to include that on an application as part of the process of applying for a job, but you don't need to include that in your resume itself.
Miss Andrea, just to add on to that, would one resume be okay for all jobs? So if you just make it once, can you just send it everywhere just like that?
That is an excellent question, Kansa, and I have a really concise answer for you. No, absolutely not. So what you want to do instead, and what I do, for example, I have a foundation resume, right? It's basically a template and it has an outline of what I want to include in my resume. But every time I apply for a new job or submit my resume for something, I change it. And so what I want to do is I tailor it to what I'm applying for. So if there's a vacancy announcement and they say that they're looking for certain experience, or there's keywords in the job duties and what you might be doing in that job, you want to try to tailor your resume to match as closely to that job as possible. And one of the reasons for doing that is because when employers are getting tons and tons of resumes in, for example, if they get 1,000 resumes for a job, they don't necessarily have the time for one person to be sorting through all of those resumes. And so they're going to be more reliant on applicant tracking systems, ATSs, to sort through for them. And so those systems are going to be pulling keywords and they're going to look for what is in your resume. And so if you have the keywords in your resume that the employer has already used in their vacancy, you are more likely to rise to the top with that employer because you're already showing that you are committed and focused. You've tailored your resume to match up with that with what that employer needs, and you look like a much better candidate in that case.
Absolutely. So make sure every time you apply to a place, you read the job description carefully and present your best self in accordance with that job description, in accordance with those particular requirements.
Yes.
One of the very important things about applying, about presenting your resume and all of that is your references. A lot of people are confused about whether they should add references to the resume or whether they should just add references, names or numbers or emails, or just like attach files that have those references. How does this work? What should we be doing, Ms. Page?
Thank you for that question. So let's first start by defining what a reference is. So anytime that you apply for a job, most jobs will ask, or most employers will ask, that you have at least 2 references. References are people who know you professionally and can basically vouch for you and say, yes, they are, an excellent candidate in these areas. I've had experience working with them. They are, punctual. They're really on top of things. So this is what a reference is. Now, before you actually apply for a job, you want to make sure that you've got a couple of people that you can utilize as reference. Now, you don't want to just put them on your resume without talking to them. You need to ask this person, is it okay that I use you as a reference? Let them know what kind of roles you're applying for. Keep them up to date. Make sure they say, yes, you can use me as a reference. Once you let them know, or you've asked them if they're okay to allow them, you to utilize them as a reference, then you can put them on your resume towards the bottom. It's fairly common in some countries to do this. You would put their full name, their position title, the place of employment, their email, and their phone number. Again, double check which phone number and which email that they prefer to use. Maybe they want their personal, maybe they want their work email. Clarify these things with them. So you can put these on your resume. A lot of people, though, commonly will put, references to be provided upon request. If you choose to put that at the bottom of your resume, make sure that you've got a formal document with your references contact details on it ready to go so that you can send that to the employer. Also, many times when you're applying online, doing an online application, they will have information, a box for you to put your references, so you might not need to include it on your resume at all. So I think the important thing here is make sure that you have secured a couple of people to be your reference. Make sure you've asked them, make sure you've clarified which phone number, which email to utilize. Keep them up to date, let them know what kind of roles you're applying for, let them know that they might be receiving an email or a phone call about you from a certain employer. And then whether or not you put it on your resume is up to you, but do make sure you've got all of their contact details ready to go. Khatsa, I think you're muted.
Yes, thank you. I just realized. So my next question is, obviously, that was really helpful. You make sure that your references are properly, you don't name people who you've never spoken to or who just know you from, just seeing you once or twice in the coffee shop. It's people who actually know you, who consent to having, your sort of CV feature them, so to say. And I think the idea really is to sort of take it job by job. If some job demands a reference, then you give it, but mostly you need to just make sure that you always have a reference. Am I right, Ms. Paige?
Yes.
Great. Ms. Andrea, would you like to add anything to it?
One question that we might have with high school and university students is, what kinds of references should I provide if I don't have a lot of work experience? And so what you should really look for is somebody who has known you for a while, right? And has been able to observe you and can speak to your abilities and your performance. And so if you don't have a lot of employers or coworkers that you can go to, you can also consider looking at people like professors or teachers that you've worked with, volunteer coordinators if you've worked with any volunteer organizations, coaches if you've participated in sports or other activities, where you might have someone who can speak to your character and the things that you bring to it. If you don't have employers that you can necessarily provide, you do have other alternatives that you can look to in your life.
That makes a lot of sense. So if you've worked a lot with your teacher, if you worked a lot with your coach, that is not going to waste. It will be useful for you in the future when you apply for things. So make sure that you maintain those relationships on a professional level, because they will definitely be useful. One of the major questions that we get while writing CVs and while making resumes is, what should the format be like? Should I make it a Word document? Should it be JPG? Should it be PDF? Should it have columns, rows? What should the font size be? All of those things. So Ms. Paige, could you speak a little to that?
Sure. So I get questions a lot about formatting, and a lot of people will want to do colors or different fonts or images or something to make it visually appealing. But my guidance is to keep it simple, keep it straightforward. As Andrea mentioned before, most employers will receive quite a stack of resumes that they need to look through. You don't want to catch their eyes with gimmicks. You want to catch their attention with key words and key skills. So when it comes to formatting your resume, start off in a Word document. You can see there's lots of templates. If you even just have Word, you can open it up and take a look. But I would start really simple, put the information down that your experiences, your education, put everything down, and then work on aligning or adjusting as you see fit. I would avoid utilizing tables or columns. Don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple and straightforward. Then when you do actually submit your resume, some platforms will actually ask for it to be submitted in a Word document if in case they have a, they look for those keywords. Sometimes, however, if it doesn't give you if it doesn't specify a way to attach it, I would always recommend to save it into a PDF file, because if you do have any kind of formatting or tabbing or anything that you've done on your resume, if you save it as a PDF, you can be sure that when they open it from their end, it will appear exactly as you see it on your screen. If you've ever tried to open up someone else's Word document on yours, sometimes it formats a little bit funny and it can look a little bit odd. So you don't want that to happen. So if it doesn't ask you to submit it in Word, then I would recommend saving it as a PDF and attaching it that way.
All right, so make sure you check the advertisement properly, make sure you check the application guidance properly. They might ask you for a Word document, but generally have it in PDF format if you want it to go exactly as you made it. Miss Andrea, would you like to add anything to this?
I completely second sending your resume as a PDF document. I do feel that that is the safest, most professional way to go. And it's become very, very easy. You can usually do so simply through the print function. You can usually just say print to PDF. There are also many easy converters that you can find online. You just need to be aware of data privacy. If you use a data converter, you might be giving away your data as well. One thing I would add as a do not do is sometimes you see people that have saved a resume to their Google Drive, for example, and they'll send a link to an employer. That's often not a good idea to do. For example, if you do that with the United States Embassy, our data blocking, our firewalls block us from being able to access Google Documents. And so you might be making it more difficult for an employer to access your resume. And and like I said earlier, you want to put your best foot forward. So you don't want to make it more difficult for a potential employer to see your resume and your great experience.
So remember, guys, no Google Docs, no Google Drive. Make sure you attach it properly and send it in a professional way, because obviously you want to put your best foot forward and you want to make sure that everything that you've done to create that beautiful resume isn't just in vain. So, you know, we've learned a lot about how to write a good resume and how to write a good CV, but there's a lot more to it. So Ms. Page, can you tell us a little about some templates that students might use or some websites that will offer further guidance?
Sure. So there's certainly no shortage of information online for guidance on resumes. All you have to do is simply Google it and you will find heaps of information. What I would recommend again is to keep it simple. There are so many different websites out there for templates and things, and lots might look really pretty and look nice, but keep it really simple. You can look at websites like Princeton Review or College Essay Guide. They've got some good examples. But I would honestly, if you've got the new version of Word, open it up, go to templates. There's some basic templates there. I would just grab one of those or even utilize your own formatting. So just put the information down there and keep it really, really simple. So I wouldn't be too worried. Don't spend too much time looking for this perfect, colorful, nice, whatever template. You want to keep it very simple. And make it work for you too. So that's why I would say, with templates and things, maybe just even open up a blank Word document, because make it work for you. You might not be able to fit the information in the way that they've presented it, or it might look a little bit weird. So just take some time, develop it. If you use a template or if you don't, make it work for you and make it very clean and make it easy for yourself.
So really, there is no way to do it which will make it look more pretty or which will make it look more aesthetic. It's about what makes you feel the most comfortable in presenting yourself better and all your accomplishments, and keep it simple, but keep it professional and keep it presentable. And you probably should be good. Would you like to add on anything to it, Miss Andrea?
Sure. When I was preparing for this session, out of curiosity, I just did a Google search for resume template to see how much would come up. And 240 million results were generated in a fraction of a second. So, like Paige said, there are numerous resources that you can make use of. You can also ask family members, friends, coworkers, if they would be willing to share their resumes with you as well, so that you can compare, see some of the ideas of what's out there. But in the end, you want to go with like what you said, Casa, whatever makes you the most comfortable, what you think looks good and portrays you in the best light.
Perfect. Thank you. So remember, no copy pasting, because no matter how presentable somebody else's resume looks, how nice somebody else's vocabulary looks, if it doesn't describe you, then it isn't nice enough to get you that job or that dream internship that you've always wanted. Before we close this off, something we often hear about is cover letters. Every time we apply for these jobs, we apply for these opportunities, it says attach a cover letter. So what is a cover letter? What makes it nice? What can we do to make it nice? Let's hear from our experts. Ms. Page.
Thank you. So I've been asked this question a lot, and many times, or sometimes even jobs don't specify that a cover letter is required. They say it's optional. But my guidance is to always submit a cover letter unless they say do not submit a cover letter. And the reason why is your cover letter is different information than your resume. Your resume shows what you've done, your education, your experience, your achievements, but your cover letter is your why. It's your opportunity to tell that employer why you really want to work for them, or why you really want to study what you're studying, what the connection is, and how you can really add value to that organization. So it's really making that transition complete and making the picture very clear for that employer to see this is your motivation and this is how you can add value. So I would always recommend to write a cover letter. Your cover letter should be 1 page, no longer. Usually only about 3 to 4 paragraphs maximum. So make sure that you write it as a standard business letter. But in those couple of paragraphs, do not just simply repeat what is on your resume. They already have your resume. They can look and see your education, your experience. You do not want to just repeat that. Otherwise, there's no point in sending the cover letter. But in the cover letter, make sure you solidify, again, your motivation. Why are you interested in this employer? What do you know about them? And how can you add value to that organization? Because if they read that and they can clearly see that you know exactly how you can add value, that will make it easier for them to put you in the yes pile. So really focus on adding to your resume, not simply repeating it.
Perfect. So if you think you've done some really cool thing, they've read it once. Talk to them about how that cool thing or that experience shapes you to add value to their organization. Maybe look at the company's values on their website, look at what the job description talks about, going back to the same idea of using the buzzwords that they wanted, in their particular employee. So just make sure to present yourself with the lens of what they want from you. Miss Andrea, can you talk to us a little about cover letters? Should I write it like a story? I am Hansa. I study at Georgetown. I like to do this. How does it work?
So your cover letter should really be written in a professionally formatted business letter. And what you should focus on, like Paige said, why do you want the job? What makes you qualified for the job? What value are you bringing to the company? And really breaking it up into those very concise, very formatted statements so that that employer knows that they just can't live without you in the future, and they know exactly where you fit into that organization.
Thank you so much for clarifying these, things about a cover letter, because they're often very confusing. With that, we come to an end. Even though I have so many questions, I want our audience to have the opportunity to ask questions, to be able to engage with our panelists, to be able to participate. So we will open the floor to your questions, our audience. I know you've been writing a lot of them in the chat box. Come up with more questions. Ask us those things that you're curious about so that we can help you make your best CV and write your best cover letter. And thank you to our panelists for giving us these tips. I'm sure after this I have a lot of changes to make to my CV, and we really appreciate hearing from you, our audience, what your questions are. So Mrs. Eel, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, Paige, Andrea, thanks, Khansa. Yes, one of the questions, in fact, lots of questions are, a majority of questions have been addressed through the discussion, and most of them are about recent graduates and how to address the lack of experience and how to write about their prior experience, and you talked about this one. The other question is how to have the resume stand out for admission for universities.
Okay. I mean, as a university student, I think, again, going back to what we said earlier, I think it's really about you presenting your best foot forward, whether that is your accomplishments, your skills, things you've participated in, and all of those. But Ms. Page.
So with any application, whether it's a university application or job application, it's always important to look at that organization. What are their values? What are their missions? Tailor your resume to match what they're looking for. Articulate your skills, your own values, your own achievements that reflect what they look for, whether it's in a student or whether it's an employee. So that's always going to be very important. Again, no matter if it's for university admissions or for a job, always important to look at what they want and tailor your application to match.
Great. So for instance, if you're applying to a particular university or a particular course, read about that course. Don't just apply to it because you read the name and it sounded fancy. Read about it, read about their values, read about what that course will teach you, how it intrigues you, and what you will add to that particular community, and then present all of that through all the documents that you submit. Mrs. Hill, next question.
Thank you. One of the questions is how lengthy should be the resume, and if there is a need to include online certificates.
Miss Andrea, would you like to address that? Considering you're looking at resumes a fair bit.
Yes, I do. So as we talked about earlier in the discussion, sometimes resume and CV are used interchangeably. So as long as we're talking about resumes, the resume is the more concise document. So you really never want that to be any more than 2 pages. If you can limit it down to 1 page, that's even better. And especially early in your career, it's a little bit easier to stick to that. It should be a really concise statement of the experience that you're bringing to the job. Online certificates can definitely be very, very, very relevant to your resume if it is applicable to what you're applying for or what you're submitting your resume for. I definitely do recommend including them. But as we've said, your resume should be tailored each time to be relevant for the purpose that it's being submitted for. So if you're just putting them in to put them in, do not include them in your resume.
Perfect. So if it's connected with what you're applying for, go ahead. Ms. Cecile, next question.
Thank you so much. In fact, this answers the question that, like, there are lots of people who are asking if I have lots of interests and lots of skills, what to include and what not to include. And in fact, you've just answered this, Andrea. So one of the participants asked this question. So there are some majors that require applying and submitting a CV and a portfolio. How to address these? Is it okay to move things and copy from CV to the portfolio, vice versa, or what's your advice?
Ms. Page.
Sure. So depending on what kind of portfolio you're looking for or you've created, what I would recommend is, if you've probably got an online portfolio, I would take that link from your online portfolio and put that on your resume so that your portfolio is an example of your work. and your resume. If they want to see examples of your work, you can put the link to your online portfolio there. So that's how I would go about if you need a separate portfolio, or if you have a separate portfolio to your resume.
Great. So from what I understand, your resume sort of lists down things you've done, how they're connected with that job, or what you've learned from them. Whereas if you actually want to exhibit a video you made, or like a painting you made, or a map you made, I don't know what portfolios could generally consist of, but whatever it is that you want to exhibit, you could have a link of that exhibition on your sort of CV, which people could click and go to.
Correct. And again, make sure it would be all in one portfolio. I wouldn't hyperlink multiple things on your resume and say, look at this, look at this. Put it all in one online portfolio, put that one link on your resume, and that way it's very tidy, very professional, and they can view everything in one comprehensive location.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. This was such a helpful session. For you, our audience, I know you guys have so many more questions, but in the interest of time, unfortunately, we won't be able to entertain anymore, but we will definitely have more sessions like this, not just on CVs, but also on things like interviews. Education USA organizes English language club sessions with various universities. So just make sure to follow our social media, follow our mailing lists. We will definitely be in touch with more programs. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Really useful, interesting, and we had lots of participants saying thank you so much to you all.